You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson. So I am coming to you live from Rome. It's not live for you, but it's live for me. So maybe I should just not say that it's live. I am coming to you from Rome, and I am in my hotel room in this beautiful building, in this beautiful hotel, in this insanely beautiful neighborhood. Very old building. I think it used to be an old mansion, a beautiful old home. And so there is a lot of noise that ricochets off of the, marble floors and the walls and that kind of thing. So if there is any ambient noise in the background, please bear with. I had said in a previous episode that I was going to be doing one more episode of the podcast before year end, and this is that episode. I wanted to do one more episode that was end of year. An end of year episode just to communicate certain things and to maybe provoke thought about certain things. About a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, and I referred to this in an earlier episode, but I had just come back from England where I was on vacation, and I came back, I was in a funky mood. I was very, how can I put this? I was restless, I was antsy. Initially I felt like I was getting a glimpse of England, a glimpse into what my life would have been like if I would have moved there when I sort of had an urge to move there, which was, 15, 20 years ago. And truth be told, I couldn't have just gotten up and moved. I didn't have UK citizenship. I didn't have EU citizenship. And it wasn't just something where I could just get up and go. So realistically speaking, that it wouldn't have happened anyway. But nonetheless, when I was there a year ago, I don't know what it was about that trip, but I found myself having a very hard time coming home. England is very much a home away from home, a second home for me. And when I came back from that trip, I was really, really restless. And at first, it was me wondering what my life would have been like if I would have moved there, even though, again, realistically, it wouldn't have happened. And then I realized that restlessness wasn't so much a sort of a nostalgia for a past that wasn't meant to be, but that restlessness was almost like I need something new. I needed to be challenged. I needed to do something that pushed me beyond my boundaries, and ultimately something that would be an offering. It would be for other people, because if it's just a challenge for me, I don't know. I need it to be something that I need it to be some sort of other expression, some other medium, some different way to do what I do in the world, but just have it be a different way to do it, something I've never done before. I need to feel like I'm learning. I need to feel like I'm challenged, but it also needs to be accessible, and it needs to be able to bring, whoever it reaches to a better place. And that's really the intention behind all of this stuff that I do. So I found myself back in Montreal, and I was feeling restless, and I thought, okay, you know what, I'm going to do things. I'm going to start to organize things that I haven't done before. I'm going to start to put things together. And what 2019 ended up being in my experience of life was a year of firsts. The first thing I did was I decided I was going to do a yoga and meditation retreat in England. I was going to bring people to my home away from home and have them experience that, the beauty of it, and just the energy that's there. And it really is about experiencing the energy in all these different places of the world, because, right now in Rome, this is the first time that I've been to Rome at this time of the year over the holidays. And first of all, the weather has been beautiful. I know we're lucky. I know that it could be rainy, but it has been beautiful, sunny, anywhere between 10 and 13 degrees. And we've just been walking everywhere. And it's just, I've been to Rome before, but I couldn't have predicted the feeling of being here now. It's so different, and it's so special, and it hits you immediately. It's like visceral. And it is about experiencing the energy in all these different places. So I decided I was going to bring people to England. I was going to organize a yoga and meditation retreat in England, first time. And that was a huge challenge for me. And truth be told, that was one of the hardest trips that I've ever given. only because it was contingent on so many things going well that I had never done before, like the food from the caterer, like the buses that passed in front of the house that we were staying in, like the weather, all that, those sort of, free agents where anything could happen, really. And, everything went beautifully. It could not have gone better, really. But I decided I was going to do this yoga retreat in England. So that was the first thing that was a new venture for me, something that would be a first. And then I decided I was going to do another yoga city break. It had been a while since I had done a yoga city break, yoga and meditation city break. And so then I started planning Rome, this trip that I'm on right now. And not only was the destination one that I had not brought people to, but it was going to be over New Year's. I was going to organize something over New Year's and, give people a New Year's that they would really remember fondly. And so that was sort of the second thing. And then the third thing I thought was, you know what? I've taken all of these yoga nidra workshops and trainings, and why don't I sort of extrapolate the best of everything that I've learned and create my own yoga nidra training? And so I did. And I sat down and I wrote the manual, and I gave it a couple of times. It's happening again in January, starting in Montreal. And the beauty of this training for me is that it has, yes, it's steeped in Hinduism and it's steeped in yoga, but it is very, very much based in psychotherapy and psychology. And everything refers us back to our mind and back to our thoughts and back to the experience of life that is contingent on what we do with our thoughts. And I thought, if I'm going to pass on any information, it needs to be this, in an environment where there is no movement to be had. So, people who ordinarily wouldn't come to a yoga class would potentially come to something like this, because it gives us the tools that we need to find more of what we're looking for in this experience of life: more happiness, more peace, more calm, more connection, more understanding, deeper understanding. So the third first was organizing and then giving the yoga nidra training. What ended up happening was that this year I also officiated the wedding for two of my closest friends. I had never done that before. I had officiated a funeral, but I had never officiated a wedding. And so this year I did that, and that sort of proved to be an unexpected first. But nonetheless, you set an intention out there, and a lot of things are going to come back to you. So that's what happened with this. And that was just a beautiful experience, and what a responsibility and what a joy it was to do that, and to be an integral part of such a special day, and not just like a special day on paper, but a spiritual special day, And then last but certainly not least, this podcast. This podcast was really not even on my radar a year ago. Doing a podcast, if you would have asked me then, I would have thought it's probably way too convoluted, way too complicated, and I don't have the time, and where am I going to get the equipment? And, I would have come up with every justification to just not do it. And to be honest, I wouldn't have thought that I could. I wouldn't have thought that, doing it at home was a possibility, or bringing my microphone to Rome or to Greece was a possibility. And I have to say that out of everything that I have done as a first this year, the podcast is one of the most rewarding, only because it is ongoing. I can sort of get across to all of you what I want to get across without having to show up at a yoga studio every Thursday evening or that kind of thing. It happens, relatively spontaneously, and it happens in a very pure and how can I put this? It's not complicated, but it's not curated. The way I do these is not curated. The files that you hear, the episodes that you hear very often are lightly to not at all edited. And so you're getting basically just a stream of consciousness. I may have written down a couple of ideas or notes, but I am pretty much just delivering it, off the top of my head. But these are the things that I really want to communicate, and these are the things that I think are important enough to communicate. So what I'm saying about 2019 is that it really was a year of new. It was a year of firsts. It was a year of trying things and learning as I tried those things. And in every single situation, there was what other people would qualify as success or define as success. everything has gone so well. And listen, again, I recognize the privilege I have. I recognize the how fortunate I am to be able to do what I do, and not based necessarily on the work that I've done, but based on the accidents of this life that I find myself in that contribute to me being able. With that said, and as I've said before, you better know that I work. You better know that I work my ass off to make all of this stuff happen. But I love what I do. This is not an ask. This is a mission. This is by necessity. I do these things because I need to, and I cannot explain to you how grateful I am that you listen and that you show up and that you do what needs to be done so that what I give out gets received and then potentially gets sent back to me in a different form or a different energy, different vibration, and that sort of feeds me to keep going, to keep doing everything I'm doing, and to keep striving to accomplish things that I've never accomplished before, and to set my sights higher and to think out of the box so that I can continue to grow and be challenged, but continue to reach everyone with these messages that I think are so essential. So I guess the intention, if I can bring one into the new year, the new cycle that is 2020, the intention that I'm carrying into this new decade, I suppose, is to continue to just realize and make manifest these firsts. Not only to prove to myself that they're possible, but to offer to you all so that they somehow tinge your experience of life with like a little more color, a little more hope, a little more possibility, and a lot more light. That's my goal. I want to offer stuff that makes you all feel like there is more hope and more possibility and more light in the world than potentially you felt that there was before you engaged in whatever I put out into the world. But with these specific podcast episodes, before you listened to the episode. Now, there are a couple of things that I wanted to mention in addition to this in terms of, firsts. The firsts that I have adopted this year, and some of the ones that came to me, but the ones that I really instigated, they're firsts that I am incredibly proud of. I don't typically look back on everything, but for this episode of the podcast, I did on purpose look back, and I just thought of, how proud I am that I took the risk to do all these firsts. And I guess if there's anything to be gleaned from it, it's for you to try to take some firsts, to take whatever risks you need to take so that you can be proud of a first that you adopted, a first that affects you in a way that is different and better than ever before. I would look at the things that, if you were being really, really honest with yourself or with someone else about, I would look at the aspects of who you are and how you're living right now that you believe should be relegated to shadow. I would look at what the vices are. I would look at what the conditions are that you believe are shameful or just not, worthy of, or stuff that you just wouldn't share with other people because you believe it's your, deep, dark secret. Or again, I've referred to Dexter before, but as Dexter used to refer to his dark passenger, whatever you believe your dark passenger is. I would look at those things and adopt firsts that help you get past what you believe the barriers are that these aspects of who and how you are have created. I think that we anesthetize in many different ways. I think that in order to make ourselves feel like the things we're embarrassed about or ashamed of aren't so bad, we do things in excess. And in my first book, The Examined Life, I talked about what the fundamental needs are, and ways that we anesthetize from, maybe getting those needs met. And ultimately, what do we do when we anesthetize? We go to an extreme, and we can go to an extreme with anything. But the question is, what are you going to continue to do? Are you someone who spends in order to anesthetize, to make yourself feel better about the stuff that you don't want to look at? Do you eat? Do you drink? Do you do drugs? Do you exercise? Do you have sex? Like, what is it? What is it that you fall back on? Because ultimately, I think what we need to realize is that, and I don't mean to be crass about this, but what are you going to do? Just like do any of these things to the point where you find that you're finally acceptable or that you're finally accepted? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to fuck your way to acceptable? Are you going to fuck your way to accepted? Are you going to eat your way to accepted? Are you going to spend your way? Are you going to drink your way? Are you going to exercise your way? Are you going to practice yoga 17 times a week and think that that's actually a good thing? Because, listen, anything in excess is not. And I don't know if, whatever your practice is, if you have a teacher or you have somebody guiding you, that person better be real with you, because I know people may be shocked to hear me say that, you can practice too much yoga, but at what point does something that brings enjoyment for you end up being a crutch that you depend on so that you don't have to look at other aspects of who and how you are, or look at how the systems that have contributed to your suffering are continuing to contribute to your suffering, and how sometimes we perpetuate those systems and become part of the thing that we object to, become part of the problem. Ultimately, we can take anything into excess. And what we want to find is moderation. We want to find as close to what we can find as being balance or equilibrium, so that we feel like we've got a certain amount of time for work, a certain amount of time for not work. We've got a certain amount of time for awake, and a certain amount of time for sleep, a certain amount of time for friends, a certain amount of time for our loved one, or rather our person we're in a relationship with. We want to find balance. And very often that happens by recognizing where we are out of balance and then pulling back, even though it may feel weird and it may start to trigger things. I think that that's what we need to really be looking at. So I think that it's vital that if we're going to do something, we do something that affects our own well-being, and we start to look at what we do in the pursuit of finding accepted or acceptable, so that we feel better about ourselves. It's really being honest about those things. Now, later on, in a couple of hours, I'm going to be having the opening circle for this yoga and meditation city break with the people who have come to Rome. And one thing I want to do with them, and one thing I'm going to do here, is dedicate our time here in Rome. And I want to dedicate it to a woman who has been on many, 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 many of my trips. Now, before, I want to say a couple months ago, the movie Judy was released. And this is a biopic about Judy Garland. And although I'm not a very big Judy Garland fan, her story fascinates me because it is a story of superstardom. It's a story of suffering, and I wanted to just see how it would be portrayed. And it was on my radar, the whole Judy, film. Anyway, right before I got to Rome, it sort of came back on my radar, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna see that. And then when I was on the plane over here, I was watching an episode of Saturday Night Live, and the episode of Saturday Night Live it started with like an American, presidential or Democratic candidate debate, and the character who was the moderator for this debate, her name was Judy Woodruff. And I believe that this is an actual person. I don't know. I don't pay attention to American politics, and to be frank, I don't give a shit. But nonetheless, this is what I saw. So started months ago with the film Judy, and then all of a sudden I see this Judy Woodruff character. Anyway, I was walking to the hotel. First night I had gotten here a couple of nights ago, and I was walking up the hill towards the hotel, and they have these very, I want to say, old-looking street lamps. Almost like they're gaslit, like it's flames, but it's not, it's bulbs. But nonetheless, beautiful little street lamps. And one of the street lamps, as I walked by, it started flickering over and over. And I remember thinking, I wonder if that's someone who's passed who's trying to communicate with me. I always go there, and I don't really give it that much validity or credence, but nonetheless, I just thought it, and then I forgot about it. Anyway, last night I woke up at about 4 a.m, and my mind was going, and I was just thinking about all these things, and I started thinking about this woman, Judy Woodruff, who first came on my first yoga retreat, which was in Santorini in Greece in 2011, and then came almost every year. And she came to, I want to say, 6 or 7 or 8 cities. She came to Santorini, she came to Croatia, she came to Istanbul, she came to Berlin, she came to Prague, she came to Barcelona, she came to Ravello in Italy. Like she was on so many of them, and she was such a presence, and she was so lovely. She was so lovely. Anyway, I found out earlier this year her son got in touch with me and let me know that she had passed away. And I really wanted to dedicate this trip to Rome to Judy, because her physical absence is very much felt, but I believe that she has been making subtle contact with me over the past, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months, ever since I first saw that movie, Judy. And last night I woke up because I was having a dream. And in my dream, I was with someone who got his hair wet. And this is not going to make any sense to you, but whatever. He got his hair wet, and when his hair was wet, he looked like someone else who had been on one of my trips. This is a friend of Judy's. Her name is Cherry, lovely Japanese woman. And in my dream, I said, "God, you look like Cherry when your hair is wet." And behind me, I turned around, and there was Judy, and she was there in my dream. And she said, "Oh, I haven't seen Cherry for a long time." And I woke up, because in my life, throughout my life, when people who have passed away, who were close to me or within my sphere of awareness, people I had known, when they passed away, they have always come to communicate with me in dreams. And very often it's to let me know they're okay. And last night, Judy, the context in which she was in this dream, she was hanging out with a man, and she was super, super comfortable, and she just seemed good. And just the fact that she was there, and the fact that she addressed Cherry, and that she hadn't seen Cherry in a long time, I woke up and I thought, oh wow, that was Judy. And that got me thinking. That started the process of associating all of those Judy moments up to last night at 4 a.m. when I woke up. I feel like Judy is very much with us, and I feel like I want to dedicate our time here to her, because I feel like she would have been here if her body was still around. And despite her body not being present, despite her physical presence not being part of this trip, she is very much here, because there are a few people here for this trip who have traveled before with her, and who really cared a lot about her, and who saw her outside of these trips. And by the way, one of the things that means the most to me when I give these trips is to find out after the fact that people who had met on them stay friends, and they stay connected. Because as I've said before, really, the secret behind all of the things I do is that it's really just supposed to bring people together. And I do it under the guise of meditation, under the guise of yoga, and the things that I have studied, and the things that I care about, Hinduism and psychology. But ultimately, what matters the most to me is bringing people together. Because that connection, I don't know if it would happen another way, and it certainly wouldn't happen through my expression, through my voice, and my humor, and my personality. And I think that specifically attracts people, and like-minded people. And so I just wanted to dedicate this final podcast to Judy. I wanted to dedicate this time that we are having in Rome together to Judy. I want to really just thank her. And, hopefully she's hearing me somehow. I believe she is. But just for her presence, for her constant presence. And I'll leave you with a little bit of a story about Judy. In 2018, I did a yoga city break in Barcelona, and Judy was there. And the hotel room that I had with my partner, who was with me, was on the roof of the hotel, and it had a massive balcony, and that's where we did the classes every morning. But in the middle of the afternoon, end of the afternoon, when people were done from like shopping or sightseeing or whatever, they would come back to the hotel, and we would go up to the balcony, to the terrace, and we would sit there and bring wine and, food, and just sit and just be together. And I had mentioned in a previous episode of the podcast that a couple of years ago there was a cancer scare in my home. Well, it was my partner who had skin cancer diagnosis. And so in Barcelona, I was on the roof with Judy and with my partner. And he said to me, okay, I didn't want to tell you this, but I have found another spot, and I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. And he didn't want to tell me because he knew that it would, make me a little bit panicky, make me start to go into sort this out mode, because I tend to go right into okay, let's deal with it mode. And he told me, he said, I didn't want to tell you. And I asked him how long he had it, and he told me it had been a little bit. And I got angry. I got angry because I had said to him, you don't wait on stuff like this. You respond immediately, and I can't believe this. And I started to, text people I knew back in Montreal to try and get him back to see the dermatologist who had seen him originally when he had the skin cancer a couple of years ago. And he had said to me, well, this is why I didn't tell you, because I didn't want you to get mad like this. And Judy was sitting with us, and Judy said to him, you need to understand he's not mad at you. He's worried. And if there's any anger, it's because he's not home and he can't deal with it the same way he would deal with it as if he were at home. And he is worried about you. And and she basically just explained it, but she explained it so rationally and so like almost intellectually piecing it together, which is good because my partner is a very, very much an intellectual thinker and thinks methodically. So she was almost speaking to him in the language that he would understand immediately. And I was so grateful to her for doing that, because she really put into words what I couldn't in that moment, because in that moment I was just in the emotional place, right? I was in the emotional brain. Anyway, when I was contacted in March of this year by Judy's son, he told me that she had been diagnosed with cancer in September of 2018, which was essentially 3-4 months after our time in Barcelona. And the fact that the last memory really I have of her, I mean, I saw her after that, but the one that really stands out is that conversation we had on the roof of the hotel that meant so much to me. And then to find out that a couple of months later she was sort of dealt a similar hand, and that ultimately it led to her bodily death, shortly the following year. I don't know, the connections there for me, well, they're not lost on me. And although I didn't know that she was ill after her diagnosis, I kind of wish I had, but I also trust that things go the way they're supposed to go. I hope that she got the same peace and the same support and the same relief that she had offered me that day on the roof in Barcelona. And so I dedicate this to Judy. I dedicate this trip that we're on and this episode of the podcast to Judy. Judy, I am because you are and you were. And so just know that you are still with us. You may not be here in body, but you are here in mind and energy and heart and soul. And for everyone else, I wish you only the best and a little bit of the worst, because it's in the moments that are the worst that we learn the most, and that contributes to success as far as I'm concerned. We learn in those moments, and when we can apply what we've learned, we are closer to where we're trying to get, which is knowing ourselves, making small corrections where we need to, and just being the clearest versions of ourselves that we can be. So to all of you, I wish you a beautiful, peaceful end of this cycle, which is 2019. I wish you continued success in seeking and finding and being for 2020. And I just really look forward to everything that is ahead of us. I don't know what those things are. I am working on a couple of things for next year, 2020 and 2021. You can look for another show, another theater show. I'm going to do a one night in a theater kind of thing, which I did a couple of years ago. And I'm in the very early, well, I've done this before, but I'm sort of gotten back onto doing research for a yoga and meditation trip. I won't tell you where, but it's the other side of the world. So stay tuned for those things. Let me finish this by saying thank you. Thank you for hearing what I have to say, for showing up so that this cycle of offering gets received and then offered back. And just know that, I want the best for all of us. And I don't mean that in a material way. I want us to have the best experiences of life possible. And that is why I do this. And hopefully that is why you listen. So with only love, I wish you a happy and healthy and bright new year. Be well, and you will hear from me in 2020. This has been the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.